I guess that kind of makes sense with Omicron, that riders would be a little bit lower than the quarter before. Everything else looks solid. Volumes, revenue per user, adjusted EBITDA. Bernie, what's the takeaway for Wall Street?
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. The major thing is that riders were down slightly sequentially. Well, consensus was expecting them to be up about 9%. We actually cut our numbers. We have a mobility supply tracker. We actually saw prices in the industry go down earlier this year, and that told us that there was a demand problem in the industry. We talk a lot about the equilibrium of supply and demand. Before Omicron, it was really focused on getting drivers back, and now I think it's going to be waiting to see how the demand comes back now on the other side of this variant.
So talk to us a little bit more about pricing. You said you saw it drop, a sign of demand, but generally, what kind of pricing power do Lyft and Uber have in this environment where it has been harder to come by drivers?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's one of the big takeaways from the pandemic for the ride-sharing companies is that there's a lot of pricing power, and consumers are showing a willingness to absorb that inflation. Long term, I still think for the health of the industry and to really expand the number of users on the platform, you want to keep prices low. But I think it shows that they do have a pricing lever to play at some point here. And I think we'll learn more about this at the Uber Investor Day on Thursday. We prefer Uber over Lyft. We have a buy rating. It's our top pick for 22. And I think that, they have some interesting levers to be pulling themselves in terms of advertising and new verticals like grocery they could be entering.
So Uber over Lyft, which implies you like the international part of the story, you like the non-ride sharing part of the story. Bernie, what's the biggest driver in your view of the upside for Lyft relative to, upside for Uber relative to Lyft?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, post-pandemic, what's next? In mobility, it's getting back to prior levels of revenue in riders. So the prior peak for Lyft, for example, was 21 million active riders. They're stalling out at about 19 here. But one of the major things from the pandemic that we do not think will be transitory is delivery, and we think delivery is going to have staying power. And subscriptions is going to be a major driver. And the more verticals that are added to subscriptions, that's going to make those subscriptions that much more powerful. So that's why with Uber, with grocery coming or already here, with them acquiring Drizzly, we think that that's powerful. And then there's the advertising business you can throw on top of it. Dara has spoken about 1% to 2% of gross bookings could be advertising. So that's a $1 billion plus opportunity. And just for comparison, Instacart's talked about $1 billion of revenue for 22 in 22. And Amazon, 14%. Their advertising revenue is actually 14% of their bookings. So it just shows it's a huge opportunity once you have that marketplace.
While we're on your favorite stocks, Bernie, I know Uber's at the top of your list, but I think you also like Peloton and have a $50 target on that stock. You think
I do.
Can you get back up there now with some of these changes?
Yeah, so I think in the way described today is certainty, right? So there was a lot of speculation in terms of M&A takeout, in terms of what was going to happen with the CEO role. They hired McKinsey, what they were going to do with cost cutting, where estimates had to go on the top line, and we have a lot more certainty about that now. The cost cutting estimates they put out there this morning were enormous. The revenue picture right now is really bleak, and the company has to move and transition from a hyper growth company to one that's focused on profitability. And when you're talking about taking $800 million of costs out of the system, that's what they need to be able, or that's what they need to do to drive that change.
Did close up 25% today on that view. Bernie, thank you for joining us. Bernie McTernan.